Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's Climate Action webinar, Biophilia in the Workplace. AIA California has developed the Climate Action webinar series to address various climate action topics, including zero net carbon design mandatory continuing education. We will provide links in the chat box where you can find our climate action webinars and free ZNCD on-demand education. To qualify for continuing education credit, AIA California provides the learning objectives for every webinar and includes them in the PDF presentation that can be made available online. A few quick housekeeping reminders before we get started today. Today's session qualifies for 1.5 AIA HSW learning units. For those who stay on and watch live, AIA California will report these units for you. It may take several weeks before credits are posted to your AIA transcript. Please use the Q&A function to ask any questions for today's presenters. You can also like a question to move it to the top of the queue. Finally, cultivate a positive learning environment. AIA California sincerely acknowledges the professional expertise our volunteer presenters provide and appreciates the diverse perspectives our attendees bring to the table. We strongly encourage attendees to be constructive in their comments and questions to the presenters and to one another to ensure we have a session that is productive in an environment that is a positive learning experience for everyone. I'd now like to introduce our first speaker, Simon Turner. Simon is past CEO of Healthy Buildings, responsible for overall corporate governance and oversight of the company for the past 13 years until June of 2019. Turner is a subject matter expert in a wide range of indoor environmental disciplines and has a special interest in the relationship between indoor environments and productivity and human cognition. Simon currently serves on the board of directors for the Green Building Initiative, operators of the Green Globe sustainability programs, and on the advisory boards of several environmental and diagnostic companies. I will now hand it over to Simon. Thank you so much.
It's a privilege to be invited to be the moderator for this session. We have three speakers for you this afternoon or this morning or wherever you are in the world. And we're going to address different aspects of the concept of biophilia in the workplace. I'll start by just mentioning that science showed that people benefit from daylight, views, and natural ventilation. And in today's webinar, we're going to talk about a set of case studies that will be used to illustrate how architects can design indoor-outdoor elements into their projects in both new construction and adaptive reuse of existing buildings, and show how integrating biophilic components can improve quality of life for inhabitants, increase connection to nature, reduce operational energy demands, and lower embodied carbon levels. I'm going to share my screen and just begin with a bit of an introduction about why I'm interested in this field. So let me just do that, if I may. So again, my name is Simon Turner. I used to run a company called Healthy Buildings. I was CEO of Healthy Buildings for 13 years and was with the company for about well over 30 years in total. And during that time, I developed a personal interest in the relationship between human performance and indoor environments. And the reason for that was out of necessity, frankly, because until clients of ours can understand there was a business case for improving their indoor environments, they were hard to move off inertia, essentially doing nothing. But over time, as this issue developed, then there was a realization that we needed to improve the indoor environments because it had an effect on the bottom line. And again, it's a question of following the money. Once landlords and their tenants could understand this relationship, there was an incentive to improve indoor environments. And I've been following that issue ever since. So I'm going to talk in my session about, if I can get this slide to advance. There you go. The business landscape that we currently see, the commercial real estate industry, and the science of biophilia, why there's a reason to address it and to take the concept of biophilia seriously, essentially. Because I think a lot of people don't really even understand what biophilia is and what the relationship is between biophilia and human performance. But let's look first of all at the economic realities of what we're dealing with at the moment. There is, and I don't think it will be a surprise to anyone on this webinar, a slow-moving train wreck in the commercial real estate industry right now, especially in downtown Class A commercial office buildings. Just a few horrific statistics here. The demand for lease space is down 40%. Building values have dropped by 25%. And in some acute cases, in some Class A buildings downtown, significantly more than that. And we've seen the whole investment of buildings in office REIT down 43%. We're seeing buildings being turned in back to lenders. We really have a perfect storm at the moment. Hundreds of thousands of tech workers being laid off. Interest rates are up, which has really caused a big problem with the lending environment for commercial real estate. Loans are defaulting. Retail customers are drying up in downtown areas, which is affecting city center tax rates. And so city services are affected as well. So cities are having to either cut services or raise taxes or both. It's not a pretty picture in downtown Class A spaces at the moment. And in some respects, architects are a bellwether of this, because you are either seeing your core business dry up if you're into TIs, or your product mix having to change as we see these economic realities begin to bite. And it all starts actually with the architectural community. I've seen that myself in my profession, when you guys tend to be the first to have to change or to suffer essentially when this happens. So let's look at some of these real estate trends, why this is happening. Again, I mentioned follow the money before. There's just less need for high-end Class A commercial real estate in downtown areas. We're seeing tenants chase less expensive leases out in the suburbs where there's easier access by car. We're seeing online work rather than a need for prestigious addresses for law firms and accounting firms and those kinds of firms, because it's all being done online to a large extent. And leases, when I talk about slow-moving train wreck, lease terms 3, 5, 10 years are becoming due, and tenants are asking for less space, or space that's altogether different from the space that they occupied before, or they're subletting space out. There's a big glut of subleases available right now. What the real word here, the real thing that's going on, is a flight to quality. A flight to quality. And if that's something I really want everyone on this call to take note of, that the solution here is to produce much higher end spaces that fit the current needs of the tenant demands, essentially. Tenants are looking for spaces where they can collaborate and innovate. The project work that they do can be done from home. These are the competitions right here behind me, my own home, which you're all invited into at the moment. But when we go into a workplace, that's where we go to collaborate. That's where we go to innovate. And that's where we go to invent. And most of that innovation and invention needs teams. And that's why we need to create spaces that encourage teamwork and mentoring as well. So if you're a more experienced worker, you want to mentor the junior staff. And if you're the junior staff, you come in to be mentored and to learn things. Those are the things that our new workplaces need to adapt for. We don't need to create cube farms. We need to create more like clubs in spaces in the future. And so that's the kind of the world we live in, and what's the way we have to create commercial space in the years ahead, right, going forward. And a key part of this is this term, biophilia. I can't tell you the number of times I've been asked when I talk about biophilia. People don't even know what it is. We may know it in this environment we're in here in this webinar, but the layman generally has never even heard of the term. So I shall define it. A hypothetical human tendency to interact or be closely associated with other forms of life in nature, a desire or tendency to commune with nature. And we know, I think the jury is in, that there is a strong relationship between human cognition and performance and this connection to nature. And I'm going to recommend to everyone here a great document called Access to the Nature in the Workplace. It's an IWBI document, came out in 2020. And what I've done with acknowledgements to them is just listed their reference list. There's about 115 or so studies here listed in this scrolling list of studies that show this relationship between biophilia and human performance and cognition. I could go through them all one by one and bore the pants off everyone, but it essentially breaks down into these 4 categories, and I will actually add a 5th. Past performance, and the 5th one here I'm going to add is people are more engaged in their workplace, which is a subset of task performance. We just do better when we're exposed to nature. Stress reduction, socialization, and creativity. All of these values or merits tend to improve when we have access to green spaces, but not just potted plants, but to better lighting, to outside air, the connection to outside air, and particularly introducing free radicals from outside air. The sound that we get exposed to, and even the hunt for temperatures that are comfortable for us, which means moving around, just like we used to do in nature, essentially. There's a lot more to biophilia than just a potted plant on your desk, essentially. But these are the benefits you get, and they do go straight to the bottom line. And that's really the key here, that if you can improve people's performance, you're going to see better profits. And that's the convincing sell eventually to your clients that they are going to make more money if they improve people's performance. And we're looking at potential improvement of around 15% in human productivity, some studies that I've seen. And I've looked at other studies that have looked beyond just biophilia and other aspects of indoor environments. And that is a huge benefit. Usually you see benefits maybe 5%, 3%, 7%, something like that. But studies that show 15% improvement in human productivity, that's real money, essentially. It's really what it comes down to. Let's talk a little bit about the mechanisms of biophilia. Okay, why do we do better when we're exposed to nature? Well, that's where we grew up, essentially. We humans have a hard time thinking beyond 24 hours or a week or a time scale of maybe a year. We have a hard time wrapping our heads around the fact that humanity has evolved over millions of years. We have a hard time wrapping our heads or even understanding that time scale and knowing how evolution really works. We just think in the here and now, essentially. And as you can see from this little graphic, simple graphic, the way we currently live is a tiny sliver of time relative to the evolution of Homo sapiens today. Okay. All of the rest of the time, instead of living in little boxes and working in little boxes like we live in now, we're outdoors, exposed to the outdoor environment. So it should be no wonder that evolutionary pressures have hardwired us to respond to natural stimuli, essentially. It's really very simple in that regard. When we can adjust our minds to think hundreds of thousands and millions of years of evolution that brought us to the present day, and it should be no wonder that we don't do quite as well in these little boxes that we've chosen to live in these days. Now, I'm going to show you a little neurology, essentially. I don't pretend to be a neuroscientist. I didn't play one on TV, and I didn't stay on a Holiday Inn Express last night. But I am going to tell you a little bit about a study where scientists have looked at different components of the brain and how they react depending on the visual stimuli, because then we can actually see physical mechanisms that are biochemical mechanisms that have created the response that we have to nature out there in the real world. When you expose folks to urban environments, it stimulates the hippocampus, which is responsible for memory, and the amygdala, which is responsible for fear. And if I don't know how many people on this call have watched the movie Free Solo, this climber that used no ropes to speed climb El Capitan in the Yosemite National Park. That guy, he had cojones to do that, I must say. But he was calm as a cucumber during that ascent. And when they did some MRI scans on Alex Honnold, the free climber who did this, they found he had hardly any amygdala. He had no fear. And it was this reaction from this little organ in the brain. But most humans fire off the amygdala when they're exposed to urban environments. Conversely, when they're exposed to natural environments, it stimulates the basal ganglia, which is responsible for pleasure. So there's a mechanism right there which may explain some of this, why we do better when we're exposed to natural environments, essentially. I want to address one thing that I get asked all the time because of my field, which is a field of indoor air quality. Do plants improve indoor air quality? Just the presence of them in the space. Well, when they put plants in sealed environments, in chambers, you can measure technical reduction in the levels of volatile organics inside sealed chambers, essentially. So technically, yes, but it's probably mostly the soils that are absorbing volatile organics. But there are, as we're learning, there are better reasons to deploy plants in the workplace than just because of a theoretical reduction in VOC levels. In real life, it's very hard to measure an improvement in indoor air quality from plants. But what it does do is improve the human response having plants. So I think it's a much better reason to deploy them than just the IAQ. But I always like to mention that because I get asked it all the time. So I mentioned earlier, there are these studies that show a 15% improvement in field and lab experiments where they've placed plants in environments versus lean environments where there are no plants. And again, that's a big number, 15%. And one of these studies concluded this, which I thought I'd pull out. Lean, it appears, is meaner than green, not only because it's less pleasant, because it is less productive. And that's really what this all comes down to. Improving our human capital. We are the most expensive component in any building. And if we can improve our human capital and our potential, that right there makes the economic case for doing this. And there is no better time than in this crisis for the commercial real estate industry to respond with solutions like this. So with that, I'm going to pass the torch to Orlaine Panay. Orlaine is a co-founder and CEO of a really interesting company called Microhabitat Urban Farming. It's a company that optimizes urban spaces through the production of fresh food. With a background in management and accounting and a strong passion for sustainability, Orlaine has developed an innovative business model that supports the environment and local communities. She has more than 200 farms under her belt across Canada and the United States. And Orlaine and the team have deployed projects with strong environmental, social, and economic impacts to businesses, schools, and institutions. And with only 7 years in business, she has brought a business to new heights by becoming the market leader and managing the largest network of urban farms in the world. So with that, I'm going to pass the presentation over to her for you to learn about how you can incorporate her values and qualities into your practice.
Thank you very much, Simon. Hello, everyone. So as well mentioned, Simon, thank you so much. I'm Orlaine Panay, co-founder of Microhabitat Urban Farming. I'm pleased to be here today and to have the chance of linking biophilic design and into urban farming. I'll be doing an overview of what urban farming is, how this has been integrated into commercial real estate with some also tangible cases, and hope to inspire you to consider integrating more nature into your future or existing projects. I'll just jump right into presenting my screen here. Urban farming, I'd love to really cover the whole concept, but just a brief introduction of who we are. As Simon mentioned, we've been at Microhabitat integrating urban farming into commercial real estate across Canada and the US since 2016. We've been deploying urban farming program in all different types of organization, from property managers to asset owners, enterprises renting out spaces as tenants, as well as healthcare institutions and schools. We truly see an alignment with biophilic design and some true benefits for human health and well-being in integrating nature into residential and commercial properties. Today, I'm going to be diving into how we can integrate urban farming, how nature benefits the end user, and how we could also create some value for commercial real estate in general. And just a quick overview, as Simon had mentioned already, just in 2022, Microhabitat have been the creator of over 140 farms. We are running actually now over 250 farms in total. You'll see in my presentation the power of urban farming and leveraging ESG objectives, so environmental, social, and the governance of a company. And this is what Microhabitat have been doing, also integrating those concepts into or very core of our business model. And we're proud to be able to say that we're running the largest network of private urban farm in the world. So I hope to inspire you to consider urban farming just a natural concept as a benefit and then value added for your existing and future projects. I'd like to start with the very basis. What is urban farming? Urban farming can take really different types of forms. The way that Microhabitat is doing it is one way. So we're focusing more on outdoor production and optimizing unused spaces through an outdoor production system. But urban farming in general is something that is related to the production of food in the urban environment. So this could be indoor farming, this could be beekeeping, this could be also egg production. It can be quite vast, and this environment in this sector is booming at the moment. There's a big increase in demand for locally grown food, for natural spaces, and urban farming is resonating a lot with local communities and urban environments. So this is what I want to present to you today, the different ways of doing urban farming. Maybe to start off, different spaces where we could integrate urban farming. As mentioned previously, us at Microhabitat, for now, we focus mostly on outdoor farming using a pot technology. I'll dive into that a little bit further in why we decided to go with this. For us, one of the main aspect was really because of structural limitation, wanting to integrate a way of integrating urban farming for existing building was really our objective for a company. But there's many other ways of integrating outdoor production. So it can be with planters, with green roof. Some of you may be already familiar with the green roof technology that had been a bit more of a mature field. And there's also other ways of integrating urban farming into indoor environment. And that can take form with integrating amenity furniture. So new types of technology are coming up on the market that can look like a furniture, or even push that further into a commercial production system where we've got vertical farming that can be integrated either using a soil methodology, hydroponic, or aeroponics. So there's a lot of different ways of integrating urban farming. I'm just going to be focusing on food production system, so plant producing system. I'm not going to be covering anything in regards to beekeeping or egg production for this presentation, but definitely I invite everyone that has a passion or an interest to learn more about those other systems to dive into the subject further. Continuing on the importance of urban farming, I think creating a bit of a sense of awareness here is important, because that was also one of the key elements of why we decided to launch this business and start this journey in urban farming. Urban farming has not only the power to leverage biophilic advantage, so making sure that humans are well in their environment and their well-being is at the center of deploying urban farming, but definitely the importance of urban farming is also related to climate change and building adaptation. I think there's definitely some new reports that are showing that we can adapt buildings by integrating plants into the urban environment. Simple concept, by integrating nature and plants onto underutilized surfaces like rooftops, we're able to reduce heat waves. We can help also reduce risk of flooding and help with rainwater management. We replenish the environment with biodiversity, and also we can cut down, especially when speaking about food production, cut down food miles. So the transportation and pollution associated with producing and the transportation of the food we consume daily. So having a local food system, transforming sterile environment and bring back nature onto these spaces is definitely an advantage in terms of climate change adaptation and building resiliency. That also allows us to create a more local food system, provide food security for local populations. I think food autonomy is going to be a predominant subject in the following years, and more cities will have to rethink how are we going to feed urban populations. Numbers are showing that by 2035, 65% of the population will live in urban environments. So we really have to start thinking about how are we going to be feeding these populations, considering that urban development is taking space on agricultural land. With all those unused spaces, there's definitely a potential and a possibility of creating a more local food system that can also have reduced impact on the environment. Speaking of reduced impact on the environment, having the urban environment as a space to grow food is optimal if we look at it from an agriculture or farmer's eye. Lots of unused spaces that have access to water, that are limited spaces in terms of how animals can access production. There's also plenty of sun exposition and heat also in the urban environment. In most cities, we can have 2 weeks to a month extra of production compared to rural areas, because there's heat waves in urban environments that are sometimes yielding 10-degree difference between the rural environments and the urban one. So those are actually benefits in the sense of production standpoint, and we can definitely leverage this to create an urban farming movement. Health benefits, being able to have a shorter transportation between the moment that a produce is harvested and the moment it's going to be consumed. That's a benefit. It has also benefits in terms of CO2 emissions. So there's a lot of advantages in creating urban farming systems, and also in terms of the benefits for the human health, definitely that links to biophilic design. More and more research are showing that, as Simon mentioned, that humans that are in contact with nature benefit from having this type of contact. We see it for physical and mental health. It helps reduce stress, increase the feeling of well-being, and that leads to a better performance in different types of spheres of our society, either be with students in school, in healthcare institution with shorter rehabilitation time. We also see it with corporations having workers being more performant when they have access to natural environments. So there's definitely some benefits for the humans in general. There's also an advantage in terms of the nutrition factor of creating these spaces. Having access to fresh produce is encouraging healthy eating habits. We sometimes, I think, forget about how our urban environments are developed, but lots of neighborhoods are still facing issues with food deserts. So the concept of not having access to fresh produce within a kilometer around where the person is living or working, that is diminishing the possibility for the person to have access to healthy produce. So making sure that we're reintegrating some food systems into different urban environment is helping not only to provide a better access, but also is fighting some of those issues where we don't have a lot of possibility to have access to fresh food. We also see some research showing that homegrown and heirloom produce, I mean, not everyone in the urban farming realm is necessarily using heirloom varieties, but homegrown and the reduction of transportation is allowing, or is actually showing that the fresh produce that are being produced are actually more nutritious. So that's a very interesting concept. If you're interested to look into this, especially with heirloom varieties, there's sometimes 50% to 70% increase in nutrition contents compared to the produce that have been produced through conventional agriculture methods. More on social connections. I think we really have to also consider the potential and the lever that urban farming can create by creating more unified environment, not only for people within one community, but through also the possibility of connecting people from different communities. It'd be the corporate world with social organization, residential properties with the rest of the community. Being able to have urban farming can create that sense of community, create a space for that type of connection, and help definitely create a sense of well-being in the communities, integrating those systems. Very interesting facts. Some of the cities that we're operating in are showing that there is actually sometimes numbers as impressive as 40–45% of the population that has an interest or is already gardening. And in most cases, in most urban areas, there's 5, 6, 7 years waiting list to access communal garden space. So we see that there's a huge demand, but yet there's not the offering that is following. So as a value creation, definitely integrating urban farming is something that is completely aligned with the trend, or just what people are wanting for their living and workspaces. I'd like to dive here into something a bit more tangible, where we could integrate urban farming, how this could be applicable in different asset classes. We've been at Microhabitat successful at integrating urban farming programs in all types of asset class, so office, industrial, retail, institutional, and residential. I'd like to dive a bit further into, for example, the office and industrial and retail. Urban farming can take place in indoor and outdoor spaces, either on roofs, patio, ground level, indoor spaces like leased space or common areas. What we see here as a main objective and also benefit is creating an experience for the occupants. I think with the presentation that Simon just did on leveraging new ways of attracting people back at the office, thinking how these spaces can be attractive to different types of clientele. I think the word of experience has been on everybody's mind, and being able to attract people back at the office or at work, or even create an attractive factor for HR is something that can be achieved by integrating urban farming. Biophilia and well-being, we've touched on this already, but definitely seeing that there's sometimes crazy numbers. We have already seen some numbers on how this can leverage the return to the office rate. Some of our programs, when we're integrating an urban farm, where there is distribution weekly of the fresh produce from the farm at the office, we see 80%, 100% back to the office rate on those days, because we understand that there's an increase in pricing and prices, and food are getting more expensive. So by being able to not only provide a natural space, but also provide food that is affordable or even free to the users of those environments is also a very appealing factor, and creates ways of bringing people back into these environments. The alignment with ESG objectives and certification is becoming a lot more predominant. We see a big increase, and Vicky will be able to touch on this, but a lot more organizations are going after green building certifications, and urban farming can definitely align with this. And not to be missed, but differentiating factor, especially when we're seeing lots of Class A building being completely empty, having full streets of vacant buildings. Being able to have a differentiating factor is a key element. It can take form in appealing to office spaces, but also for industrial. So for example, we see a lot of issues with attracting and retaining talent. Well, being able to have that offering that is a bit different from what's offered normally on the market is also a great way of making sure that we can answer some issues in that regards. And team building, being able to have opportunities where teams can actually gather around a project that can be interesting for different age groups, and that can be really creating the unification in those organizations. Institutional, definitely a lot of potential. Senior living, youth services, hospital, rehabilitation centers, schools, special needs program, prisons, governmental agencies. We've done all of these types of institutions. We work with youth services, hospitals, and so on. And we can see really how urban farming can even deepen and have a deeper benefit for communities on top of the food production and the natural space benefit. Being able to have a program that can show new career path is something. Social reintegration, new job opportunities, especially when we're looking into youth services or prison. Being able to touch on food literacy and healthy lifestyle, really rebuilding this around food production, and then making a link onto just or healthy lifestyle is definitely something that has a benefit. We were just mentioning before in our brief, we see that when students of school are growing food, they'll be engaged and will want to eat the food and eat healthy. So I think it really creates a whole chain of effect of just creating that possibility for these community to have a greater connection to the food that they consume daily and have a benefit for their whole health and also well-being. Similarly here, we also see alignment with ESG and certification. I think more and more we're seeing pressure from governments and different types of bodies to have more recognition and have more engagement in ESG, and being able to have something that has a tangible factor is something very meaningful. We see too many times people are trying to push sustainable action in different environments, but if the occupant is not engaged with the sustainable action, it's sometimes hard to sustain it. So by having an urban farming program in which creating that bridge where people can actually connect and have a tangible factor with that sustainable action, it's pretty rare that someone can taste and touch sustainability. Rehabilitation, I've mentioned this briefly, but there's a lot of papers showing that there's actually a benefit when people in, for example, hospitals or rehab centers have access to natural spaces. The recovery can be quicker. So that's definitely a benefit. And lastly, in residential properties, multifamily, condominium, apartment building are all good fit for urban farming. As I mentioned, people are looking into having more natural spaces. I think COVID has really shown how important that is, especially seeing some apartment buildings or condominium without balconies, without a lot of common spaces outdoor. People felt constricted in their environment. So having really a thorough review of how we're seeing our living environment, and integrating more natural spaces is definitely providing people with better and a greater and more beneficial environments. When we're integrating urban farming and residential property, it's really answering the rising demand for locally grown food. People want to know what they're eating, where it's coming from. They want to be part of also this system because they realize that it's an activity that they actually can enjoy. It helps in community building and bonding. It helps also with food literacy, and the demand for common spaces and activities for all age groups is rising as well. So I think those are all main concepts that are resonating with different asset class, and hope to inspire you and how you can initiate discussions with your different stakeholders and for your existing projects. So maybe to touch a little bit on the benefits of urban farming and commercial real estate. Definitely there's an increase in property value. There's a lot more research that are showing sustainability in general is helping in creating value in transactions and leasing. So I have a few reference in my presentation that I'll be happy to share later on in the following slides, but definitely a lot more of the commercial real estate world and just the world in general is seeing how this could create increase in property value. Improved sustainability, as mentioned earlier, being able to have more resilient buildings, adapt to climate changes. Fun little experience that we had, one of our clients had to redo a whole drainage system of a building. We were able to create an urban farm, and because of the integration of plants, we were able to not have to the client didn't have to redo the drainage system. The plants were helping in reducing stress and help reduce rainwater management. So those are key elements that we're seeing for sure. This movement of urban farming is still new, so we need to really focus on having more data and more metrics to be able to show how much this is actually beneficial. But I think more and more there's a different organization regrouping to be able to have that kind of metrics. Diversification of income streams, definitely there's a potential there. They say by some research are showing that by 2028, the market value of urban farming will be over $500 billion. So there is definitely a big potential to increase and integrate income streams within commercial real estate by the integration of urban farming. And as mentioned previously, community engagement is not to be missed. It's something that truly differentiate properties, truly differentiate also in how people are going to be attracted to be back at the office, back at work, and have more of an engagement with the community that they're in. Not everything is perfect in that realm. As I said, it's still a pretty new domain, a pretty new sector. There's still some challenges, and maintenance costs is one of them. Being able to have the right partners, to have also the right setup for the environment is going to be key to having a successful a program in action. Definitely, it's important to have a very thorough evaluation of spaces, community impact, and what are the main objectives to have a successful program. But I feel with the right players and the right partners, it's definitely possible to offset this challenge. Zoning restrictions, I think we still have to do quite a lot of work. Zoning restriction as well as lacking fiscal incentives are two of the main challenges for now for the for the expansion of urban farming. Zoning restrictions can vary depending on the way we're integrating urban farming. For sure, when we're thinking about more of industrial way of integrating urban farming, that can become a bit more tricky, but that's also why we have most of the time collaboration with architects and people in that sphere, in that realm, to be able to navigate through this and even start to open, I think, the horizons from municipalities and different governmental bodies on how they recognize the integration of green roof, the integration of urban farming, and maybe have some changes in zoning restrictions. In my opinion, the biggest pain point is lacking fiscal incentives. For now, in most markets in North America, there's not really a lot offering, in terms of financial benefits, tax credits for organizations that are integrating green infrastructure that are aimed to be doing urban farming. For now, most are focused on the green roof technology, but as we're seeing, most of these when commercial organizations are integrating green roof technology is normally not for food production. It's more just as a way of having more of an ecological and a way of benefiting the carbon footprint of the building, but definitely being able to have more fiscal incentive, and that could align with also infrastructure that would be in urban farming. It's something that we definitely have to work on. We see some solutions for these challenges. In terms of maintenance costs, I think we really have to start rethinking on what kind of production system we're integrating depending on the condition of the environment. I think we have to stop thinking that we can grow whatever we want, wherever we want. We have to consider the local environment and start thinking about low maintenance and drought resistant plants. Most of you probably know, and I'll just seeing so many grass fields in most properties, and especially when we're heading towards more southern region, it doesn't make sense. I think we really have to start rethinking and creating maybe more of a movement of why grow grass if you could be growing greens, or why grow grass if you could be growing food, because we're seeing it with some of our projects. We could be creating a farm that is going to be using half of the water consumption that a grass would be using. So I think seeing that there's potential to not only have a better consumption, have a more of a logical way of using our natural spaces, but also creating something meaningful for the local community by also integrating edible components to our landscape as something we have to think definitely to be able to align with the future. Integrate service that are yielding benefits for the occupants can also increase the perceived value and gain in property value. We've got some projects where organizations have been integrating the urban farming program, and we're able to triple, quadruple, quintuple the investment by being able to have that as a key element and a differentiating factor, and being able to leverage that to have a better valuation of the square footage of the building that they're leasing. Other things that we're seeing for zoning restrictions, working with local officials to advocate for zoning changes and waivers, having a research community, the research community behind us also to show the metrics, show why this is beneficial for local community, not to forget about the benefit of also creating a green economy and a local economy that's aligned with sustainability, collaborate with community organization to be able to achieve those objectives is definitely going to be key. And in terms of lacking fiscal incentives, establish communication channels with municipal and governmental agencies of all sorts, being able to promote this kind of action. I think it's still a challenge that most people don't actually know that this can be done, and don't think about urban farming when thinking about how we develop our urban environments. So being able to promote this and create some awareness around this practice is definitely key. And furthermore, having different bodies recognize this and provide financial incentive for organization taking on green initiative in that sense is going to be beneficial. So as I said, mention and invest in data analysis and quantify better urban farming benefits. I'm towards the end of the presentation, but I'd love to present you briefly a case study. We've been integrating a program at Skytown Peter Cougar Village, so a very large community of 33,000 people in Manhattan, New York. The property has over 88 acres in downtown New York, so it's a pretty impressive community. It's a residential community. We've been integrating a program there where we're producing over a ton of food per season. And what we've seen as major advantages is replenishing the environment, seeing native pollinators that were starting to be disseminated, no longer in the environment, coming back and really reintegrate the urban environment, being able to have very local food production. So what we were able to do there is provide some food for the local community, provide some food also for local food bank, because we have a program that is supporting local food bank across all of our branches. Have also a portion of the production go to the elderly community and disabled residents for them to have direct access to fresh produce. And a last element of that program that was added mid-project was the integration of a group called Sociability. So we have disabled residents, so either with the spectrum of autism or other disability, being part of the program, having that opportunity as a first way of connecting with the farming world and seeing this as a possibility of a career path or even some work opportunities for that community. So we really see a way of having a lever here to feed local community and create some meaningful impact also that goes further than just a food production system. Starting to transition into Vicky's presentation, I think more and more commercial real estate is starting to recognize the benefit of integrating sustainable action and urban farming and natural environments in general. We've been proud to be partnering with BOMA to present how urban farming can be integrated in commercial real estate. So for those of you who are interested, we've got a guide that is freely available on our website that really touches on this, show case studies on different type of asset class that's been successfully integrating programs. So you can really see what are the alignments, how that ties to also BOMA, but also UN objectives and even other certifications. We're seeing a lot more value from different types of organization, commercial real estate that are recognizing this. The latest review from CBRE proves that there's an increase of value when doing transaction with buildings that have been putting an effort in integrating sustainability. So definitely there's a lot more that is coming up in that sense, and the demand is definitely speeding up. We see a lot more interest in Fitwell, LEED. We'll touch on green globes as well. I'll let Vicky explain all of this, but WELL and BOMA have been the main ones. And what we see now is that the fiscal incentive or the financial incentives that can actually come from this is becoming very interesting. We see some organizations that are able to present some objectives, for example, for LEED or for Fitwell or for WELL. And once they're able to achieve those objectives, they're able to go and negotiate where either their lending partners or insurance company to reduce their ratings and their rates because they decided to, or they were able to prove that by integrating more sustainability, creating more resilient environment, then their risk factor is decreased. So there's definitely a financial advantage there, but I think having also a backup from municipal organization or governmental organization to support even further this movement is going to be definitely beneficial. So in conclusion, urban farming, biophilia, and green building certification is definitely a way of creating value added in different type of asset class. In regards to urban farming, it create also a greater access and food autonomy for local population. It creates property value, it reduces environmental impact, and we're really starting to build more resilient urban environment of all sorts. So I'll pass it on to Vicky. Thank you so much for listening today. As I mentioned, if you have an interest in learning more, Microhabitat is active across North America. So I'll transfer the lead to Vicky, who will be covering green building initiatives.
Great. Thank you so much, Orlene. I learned a lot. I love this topic, and Simon always does a great job of picking up biophilia for us and bringing the science to the table. So I'm going to be talking about biophilic design and how it fits into green building certification, but I'm also going to talk about that big picture piece of environmental social governance and how that is also driving focus for the commercial real estate industry. And so as architects, designers, specifiers, there is so much happening in the global environment right now that is creating demand and causing us all to do business differently. So first, in case you aren't familiar with the Green Building Initiative, we're an international nonprofit organization, and we're focused on reducing climate impacts by improving the built environment. And we like to think that we're developing educational roadmaps. We happen to call them rating systems. They result in certification programs and on-the-ground validation for what's being done in individual buildings as well as portfolios. And our primary tool is Green Globes. It is an international certification. We're working on our global expansion right now. And we have a system called Guiding Principles Compliance, which is used for the federal government. We've helped over 1,000 federal projects with their sustainability objectives through that program. And the thing that brings us all together, our board members like Simon and 17 other of his compatriots, is that we believe that sustainable, healthy, and resilient buildings should be available for everyone. And we need to do as much as we can to update our built environment, our building stock, and get more access to these incredible buildings. And this is the big picture. I wanted to give you an opportunity to see all of the different things that are being talked about. I, like many, have been to a number of different conferences, even just this year, and almost every single one of these topics comes up and comes onto the radar screen for those who are involved in designing buildings or improving existing buildings. One of the first things I wanted to talk about was what's happening in Europe, and this is regarding environmental social governance. And so I'll first do a really quick explanation of what has happened with ESG emerging. So environmental social governance is really an evolution. It's an evolution of us having a focus as commercial real estate professionals on all of the different aspects of sustainability that we can impact and improve with every decision that we make. And so as an architect, you know very well, as you make decisions about materials, that you're having an impact on carbon emissions, you're having an impact on health and wellness on the interior, and you're also having an impact on function. So the E in sustainability is all about sustainability and tying that together. For many years, we have seen some of the most profitable companies also be the companies that have a really strong focus on social issues and corporate social responsibility. So that's everything. The S is everything that we do to promote social equity. It is everything that we do to ensure the safety of our employees. If we have multi-family buildings, it's everything that we do to support the health and safety of the families and people within our dwellings. It's everything that we do to support communities, whether it is sponsoring Little League teams or opening up your spaces to make them more accessible to members of the community. That all falls under social, as well as our all-important diversity, equity, inclusion efforts. And then governance really ties this all together. And the emphasis on governance has really come to a head since about 2020. And here in the United States, we have the Biden administration and the Securities and Exchange Commission really putting a focus on ESG and asking public companies through a regulatory an announcement that they're taking a look here and that they're asking for public companies to begin declaring exactly what they are doing on environmental, on social, and when it comes to governance, it's all about transparency and accountability. And so both government, investors, and consumers are all creating demand at the same time for accountability. So we have the tipping point that we've reached in net zero carbon, and we have this tipping point on ESG being driven by investors. Now, back to Europe really quickly. So in Europe, they have been ahead of the game in saying that we do a lot of investment in the real estate community, real estate investment trusts. And so anything that happens related to investment, we want to have accountability with that. And so the European Union came up with a taxonomy that said if you're calling yourself a green fund or a green REIT, sustainability focused REIT, you have to report out on your social equity initiatives and also on your sustainability initiatives, including a focus on material selection. And remember that social piece is the one that potentially ties in our health and safety and our biophilia and all of the things that we do to enhance lives. That EU piece has evolved into corporate sustainability reporting directive, where these companies or corporations are going to have to report out now and provide LCAs and EPD. And so let's just say that the reporting focus has gotten extremely huge. So we need to have stories to tell. We need to have stories to tell investors and ways to report out in our community. And the intersection now, green building used to be completely driven by a conversation around energy and water. And when we talked about rooftops, we talked about heat island impact. And now we have this focus on social coming into play and making sure that we're doing the utmost that we can with all of our decisions to enhance lives. And that's where the connection is with biophilia and connecting our indoor and outdoor environments. And so I'm going to talk a little bit generally about Green Globes, just as an example of green building certifications. For those who don't know Green Globes, we have an interactive online questionnaire. We use the rating system as a roadmap to help with decision making. So it's really important that our questions prompt thinking by architects about these issues. We know that there are lots of different types of buildings, and as Orlane detailed, all different types of buildings can benefit from what's happening in the market today, with a focus on that connection between indoor and outdoor environments. And we provide a lot of different pathways so that you can use these techniques that you were hearing about from Simon and from Orlane, and hopefully derive credit and opportunity to show that accountability on the ground. One of the ways that we are incorporating these market changes is by updating the green building rating system, Green Globes, through an American National Standards Institute consensus process. And so we have subject matter experts like yourselves sitting on committees, and we've got a 2023 version of new construction and existing buildings. And even our 2021 version of EB incorporates recognition of these changes in the marketplace, and rewards those portfolio owners and building owners who are able to demonstrate that they do have, they know where they are on their ESG journey in enhancing lives, and they are able to demonstrate that, and we can help them earn credit for that. And also, a lot of what Orlane and Simon talked about too was resilience oriented, and how having diversification, just like we have energy diversification, having diversification of where we get our food from is critically important. And so as we do risk assessments on our buildings, if we have people that get trapped in their environment for a period of time, and unfortunately some of us experience that, we need to make sure that accessibility is one of the issues that we consider. We also have a big focus on making sure that when we do our updates, that we take that opportunity to reflect on exactly what has been happening in our marketplace. And so after what happened with COVID, it was top of mind for those who serve on our consensus body that we need to look throughout the rating system to find ways to reward a focus on things like biophilia. And so you can see here where we have a red line, and we're going to be incorporating these thought processes into the next versions of Green Globes. But Orlane talked about rooftops, and there is a lot of opportunity with rooftops for micro farming. But we can also be thinking interior wise, and when it comes to either outdoor or indoors, the key connection and what relates to biophilia is that we're giving people more connection to that external environment, to nature. And so every building that has an opportunity for people to get outside and be connected to plants is an example of creating a biophilic connection for people. So it's great when we have windows, but if we don't have windows, there are other ways that we can create external connection and internal connection to nature. We can be thinking in every design about how to incorporate the existing landscape into our structure. And again, these are not new concepts. We always want to save mature trees. But when you pair that with the science that Simon brought to bear, and you pair that with the opportunity that we have to create more food security that Orlane talked about, you really think about your environments differently. And so it's not just about mature trees, it's about where are we going to put the people, how are we going to give them access to views of those trees, how are we going to incorporate the natural environment into our interior design, as well as enhance it in terms of exterior. This is a great example of a 2 Green Globe certified building. It's a headquarters, Young Living. They are a very nature, health and wellness oriented company. And they have a beautiful, beautiful campus that we were able to certify and validate what they were doing on the ground. So in this example, they have demonstration gardens. They have access to those gardens to conduct teaching and research. They leverage it as a community amenity, as well as, of course, giving their own workers who are on campus access to it. So it's all about incorporating nature into the design. And this is a really spectacular example too. They have a courtyard, they have skylights, they have a waterfall and a reflecting pool, and they're able to leverage their water efficiency to help support those water features. Another example of how our rating systems are helping to encourage thinking about urban farming opportunities and opportunities to get the people who are on our campuses involved with the landscape is through incorporation of areas where they can get outside. So we have edible landscapes as a thought process, creating food forests and community gardens. We work with a lot of multifamily. That's been one of the greatest areas of our growth over the last 3 years, is helping to certify multifamily. And surprisingly or not, a lot of workforce housing and Class B and C portfolio owners are completely on top of this concept of ESG and focused on enhancing lives. So they not only have incredible programs that help their folks stay in their apartments and in their homes during bad times in the economy when they might not pay their rent, but they're also promoting hydroponics inside their community buildings, and outside of their community buildings, they're creating gardens and spaces in vegetated areas. Here in Maryland, in this picture, we have the Environmental Services Headquarters. This was in the early days. They created an apiary on site, and they have since ensured that all of their fields have wildflowers and natural support for local pollinators. And other examples are that we can give credit in Green Globes, not only for those features, but also for chicken coops and aquaponics farms and also greenhouses. So there's just a lot that we can be thinking about. At local restaurants that have small greenhouses, wherever they can fit them in, that's a huge opportunity. And I was asked also to talk a little bit about other certification programs, and you have a lot of choice. It's really fortunate. We're completely focused at GBI about creating access to third-party certification and keeping our policies open to recognize multiple certification programs. And as we change with the global environmental objectives that are pushing us, consumers are pushing us, investors are pushing us, all things are coming together right now to create more change than we've seen in a very long time. And in fact, one of my favorite quotes is that a gentleman from Oracle was at one of the net zero meetings I was at, said, everything that's happening today around these global environmental objectives, this is triggering something that is going to be bigger than the Industrial Revolution. And so as we're writing policy, we're looking at regulatory things that are happening, and you have an opportunity to influence it. We encourage you to help keep policies as open as possible to let innovation happen, whether it's green building rating systems, health and wellness rating systems, site rating systems, whatever comes along. These are tools that you're going to want in your toolkit. And so on that note, if you're using any of the other certifications out there that Orlane mentioned, BOMA Best, Green Globes, LEED, WELL, Fitwell, any of them, you're going to want to look for these key phrases that are on the right side of our screen. These are key phrases where you're going to be able to align your clients' objectives around biophilia, around landscapes, around supporting pollinators, around supporting access to healthy food, around supporting that connection between the indoor and the outdoor environment, as well as food security. All of these things can be found in these different rating systems, different certification programs by searching on these key common words. And all of the program providers and developers have great staffs that are super happy to help you navigate those programs. And if you do have interest in Green Globes, you can always find us at thegbi.org. And just as a little teaser, I guess, I'll leave you on the Green Globes topic with a note that we did come out with a Green Globes health and wellness distinction. And so many of the areas of credit that I just reviewed, as well as a lot on indoor environmental issues related to air quality, are contained in a little subsection that we have designated as health and wellness criteria. And if you can achieve Green Globe certification plus a minimum amount of credit in these areas with minimum requirements, then you can earn an extra distinction for your clients so that they can have a validation for their stakeholders that they are indeed focused on health and wellness. This month, we're going to be coming out with Green Globes Net Zero Carbon and Green Globes Net Zero Energy. The logos are a little different than what I have on the screen, but we'll have 3 levels to help get building owners and portfolio owners somewhere on the roadmap to validating where they are in their net zero carbon and net zero energy journeys. And I think both Simon and Elaine pointed to the fact that when we think about carbon, we need to think about plants. We need to think about that connection between our indoor and outdoor environments. And so we're really happy to help create those connections. And I believe we are at the point where we're going to be able to switch over to Q&A. And Simon, I think you're going to moderate that for us.
Yes, for my sins, that is my job to moderate. And there's a few questions that come in, some that Elaine has answered online, but I'm going to actually ping her to answer 1 or 2 of them in person as well. There's one question I'm going to answer on ROI in a minute, but let me kick off by getting Elaine to address a question here about structural retrofitting to support additional weight, code implications, because that's a key architectural question that everyone on this call needs to hear in case they didn't read her answer. So Elaine, would you mind readdressing that in person?
Absolutely. So really, I think that was at the core of founding Microhabitat. We were seeing that most existing building had limitation in terms of load-bearing capacity to welcome urban farming. And that has been, in our sense, an issue and why we didn't see as many urban farming and green spaces on underutilized spaces like rooftops. There is still those limitations. The green roof technology, the nuance between the green roof and how we're integrating programs at Microhabitat, you can see it behind me. Microhabitat, we're using some textile pots. When I'm mentioning the green roof technologies, I'm referring to the technology that is intrusive of the roof membrane. So we're really integrating a permanent structure where there is protective membrane, there's soil, and then there's organic and plants integrated onto these spaces. Most of the time, these setups are going to be used for ornamental use. Then there's not much urban or food production done with those technology, because to be able to grow food, we need a certain depth of soil. So if we don't have that space, it's hard to be creating a food system. So that's the reason why the green roof technology has been limited, because most of the time the building cannot have that much soil and have that technology, because the infrastructure hasn't been built for this. So we saw that as an issue of how to integrate urban farming into either existing building or also in new constructions. But when we were in a case where the building and the construction wasn't aiming at integrating a structure that could welcome urban farming. So I think one of the key elements of seeing more urban farming is having technologies that are going to be fitting with existing building. And that's what we came up with at Microhabitat, is integrating projects with the textile pot technology. So we don't pierce the membrane, we don't modify the space, we don't excavate. We're integrating those pot system, and we're able to also distance the infrastructure and the growing system to be able to have systems that are going to be staying on site, especially in northern region when there's snow accumulation, to make sure that the farm can actually fit with the existing structure, so we don't have to modify the load bearing capacity of a building. We can just optimize the space as is. So for sure, that's one of the key elements of integrating urban farming in existing buildings. And after that, for permits and just to align with cities' requirements, we always have to look. Different requirements are going to be changing from one region to another, but most of the time, if the infrastructure is not permanent, we are able to align with local codes. So different ways of navigating into this, but definitely having technologies that are built that are adapted to existing building is going to be a key, I think, in seeing more and more urban farming system being integrated into the urban environment.
Okay, I'm going to bounce around, give everyone a chance to answer some questions. Vicky, this one's for you. I see you already again answered online, but this one I think would be good to hear from you live about B Corp certification and its relationship with GBI certification, for that matter, other certification programs as well. Perhaps you could just touch on that, on B Corps and their relationship to certifications.
Great. Well, B Corp and GRESB, just as examples of frameworks that are focused on evaluating an organization's entire approach to ESG. They all recognize that buildings are a part of that. And so they recognize Green Globe certification as part of the credit that you can earn for where you are on your ESG journey. So to earn B Corp certification, you would theoretically report on any buildings you own and what percentage of those have achieved certification. So Green Globes, for example, is a tool in your toolkit. And also in regards to GRESB, Green Globes is worth full credit toward GRESB certification. So any of your clients that want your help in helping them get as much credit as possible on performance issues, you're going to want to point them toward green building certification. So hopefully that answers the question. The one thing I did note in my written answer is that only certain types of corporations can pursue B Corp certification. So if you're a nonprofit, a hospital, or any other type of nonprofit, B Corp certification is not available to you. And so there's a little bit of a limitation there.
Very good. Thank you, Vicky. I'm going to answer the next question. Can someone speak to cost benefit analysis for, e.g. first costs, long-term financial benefits, payback periods, etc.? It's great to hear productivity increases 15%, but how does that enter into a financial decision to invest if there's no comparison to investment costs? That's a really good question, and one I can actually answer directly, because I'm on a speaker program with a CEO peer group called Vistage, and I actually have a speaking session that I do on that very subject, because my goal with that is to persuade CEOs to invest in better indoor environments for their worker. And the only thing that's going to talk them into it is if they can see an improvement in the bottom line. So I'm just very briefly going to share my screen and see if I can find here it is. It's called a productivity gain from workplace improvements, simple Excel spreadsheet, where I took this math from a great document by Stock, S-T-O-K, which is a company in San Francisco that does a publication called The Financial Case for High Performance Buildings. And if you run the math through this, and here, as you can see, I've entered 15% as a potential productivity gain. You can see how you can bring a profit margin, 10% profit margin, say of $1 million, up to 1.15 million by this simple math here. I won't go through it all, it's in the interest of time. But it's not just adds 15% of your profit margin. It depends on the number of employees and what the revenue is per employee and so on and so forth. But yes, there is math to calculate what it might be. You can plug any number here you like and come up with a bottom line improvement. And you then bear in mind that that improvement amortizes over multiple years and then will add to through net present value, and then it will add to the value of the company as an enterprise value overall. So there's some serious money at stake here if you get this right. So I will stop sharing my screen, but I did want to show you that. Yes, there's math there that's very convincing for people who want to dig that deep into it. Okay, the next question, Vicky, I think I'll ask you to, how might you recommend incorporating biophilic design into a portfolio standard? Can you kind of address that broadly? I know you have in some detail, but just broadly, how you might do that.
Yeah, I'm actually really intrigued by the question, and it made me think about how we incorporate daylighting and judge whether or not someone has maximized their opportunity to give everyone access to daylighting, but we look at it on a single building basis. So perhaps the way to incorporate, if you're measuring a portfolio's attempt to implement biophilia across a portfolio, perhaps it's a percentage of how many of the workers inside the building or the occupants inside the building have access to some aspect that we've talked about with biophilia. So there would have to be some parameters created for that. Is it within 5 feet of space? Is it within eyesight view? Is it within a quarter mile walk that you can get to easily on a break? So it would be really interesting to have that debate in one of our consensus bodies.
Another question that popped up, which I'd like to share the answer with Elaine and myself. Is there a concern with pollutants being absorbed by the edible plants, either through the air or the soil? Well, it's so funny someone should ask that, because when I ran away just now, it was to pick up my thesis from my college when I was at university, which, believe me, was a very long time ago, because it was on that very subject, as a matter of fact. And I have a whole section inside this thesis on that subject. And there are actually membranes and between the root system and the edible portion of many plants that actually prevent heavy metals, for instance, from being absorbed into the edible portions. Again, this was a long time ago. I'm sure Elaine's got more current information that exists in this document. Maybe Elaine, you'd like to give us your answer as well, because it's a very key question, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, we always have to consider and evaluate every space specifically for that environment. But what we've been seeing is one of the key elements of growing in the urban environment is most cities and most urban areas have restrictions on the use of pesticide. And I think that this is a very important factor to not and to look into when we're growing in an urban environment and compared to rural areas. The issue that farmers are facing is having the blown off chemicals from other production and conventional farming. This is not something that we see in the urban environment, so that's one of the advantage. For sure, pollution can have an impact on production, but it'll depend on the kind of production, on the space also where we're going to be growing. There's definitely also advantages in creating roof systems, because some of the dust from the urban environment is not going to access those spaces. And for sure, I think one of the element of that question was very interesting in regards to the soil contamination. Lots of research have been showing that existing soil in the urban environment can have a level of contaminants because of the nature of urban areas. For sure, this is not it's not something that we have to overlook. It's something that we have to consider, and at Microhabitat, that's the reason why we're also always creating new environments with soil that is clean, because that can be an issue for sure if we're considering growing directly in a contaminated soil or a soil that haven't been tested, not only for just human health in general, but also in terms of a yields of urban farm. Most people won't think about the quality of a soil when creating those systems, but having a nutritious and also live soil is going to be the key element basically of a successful urban farming production. And sometimes rebuilding a soil and removing contaminant can take decades. So for sure, that's one of the key elements when integrating urban farming programs.
Okay, well, I'm gonna finish with one more just comment I see here from Susan Rainier, and then I will pass it back to Sarah to run part of the seminar. She writes, environmental social governance seems to be the true democracy, but a beautiful and creative vision of everyone working together to raise the awareness of living in harmony with nature as being essential to human health and well-being. This is so much more important than the greed-driven war machine putting the entire globe at great risk. How can this become a more focused point in political debates? Well, Susan, I'm going to wrap this up by saying, by co-opting Bob Dylan, who said, "The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind." And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Sarah to close the seminar out.
Thank you so much, Simon, Orlane, and Vicki, for your guys' presentation today on biophilia. For those of you who are still watching, stayed on live today, AIA California will report your units for you for your AIA transcript, and we'll be sending a follow-up email with some additional information and some links you can find some of our other AIA California courses on demand. Thank you guys again so much for your presentation. We'd love to have you guys back, and thank you everybody for joining today. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.